For this project, I will be using some white polymer clay. To give the stems a bit of structure, I am using some armature wire. To cover the wire, I just take a blob of clay and roll it out to the full length of my wire. In order to keep the polymer clay from sticking to my hands, I'll use just a little bit of cornstarch and apply it with a soft bristle brush. This part I really enjoy doing is just twisting the clay around the wire. Pull in one direction and twist in the other. Let it roll very natural and very organic. Since these mushies are going to be fairy tale like, we're not trying to achieve realism, we're not trying to achieve perfection. To add a little character and texture to the stems, I'll just use a plain toothpick. I'll let the other stem rest for a while and continue to work on the larger stem for the bigger mushroom. You can use a toothpick or an awl or any type of object to really get into the crevices and create some very interesting details. Wouldn't these make some really good horns for a unicorn? Future project? For the smaller mushroom, I'm going to make a little teardrop shape in which I can drape clay over. But before I can do that, I'll need to attach it to the stem and then put it into the oven to bake for about 30 minutes. I want the stems to appear as if they've gone through different stages of growing. So I'm going to make the base a little bit thicker. There's no real magic secret here, it's just wrapping around a little bit of clay and smoothing it down with my fingers. After all, they're our absolute best tool. But having a few inexpensive sculpting tools can always make the project go a little bit easier. Directly above the trunk, I'm going to create a little bit of a flowery flounce. So I'm just going to flatten out little pieces of clay. In order to attach the raw clay to the already baked clay, I'm going to use a little bit of liquid clay. It's just a very simple technique of wrapping the small pieces around the stem and blending it down into the trunk. With the edge of my tool, I will just separate out the layers. I got this idea from mushrooms that grow up the side of a tree. With a sharp tool such as an awl, I'll just start creating little details, little flounces, little divots, little creases. Before moving on to the mushroom caps, I'm going to go ahead and pop these into the oven and pre-bake them. Now that everything has been pre-baked, I can go ahead and work on the mushroom caps. I prefer to use a little bit of cornstarch on my work surfaces. This way it doesn't stick too much. First, I'll add just a thin layer of liquid clay. And this will begin to form the outer part of our mushy cap. With the heat of my fingers, gently caressing the clay and smoothing it down. If you're worried about too many fingerprints, you can use any soft bristle brush, that works too. I'll just cut off a little bit of the clay to make a rough circle. Nothing perfect, just keeping it easy and organic. To thin out the edges of the clay, just kind of rub it gently back and forth between my fingers. I thought it would be interesting to give the mushroom caps a bit of a fantasy sort of shape. I'm taking my inspiration from everyday garden flowers. At this point, the clay is pretty warm, so I'm just going to let it set off to the side and cool down a bit. And in the meantime, I'll make some spores. To give the top of our mushroom a little more visual interest, I'm just gently stretching the clay upwards. Using some liquid clay, I will attach the spores to the mushroom cap. This one is ready to bake. I'll put it in the oven for a full 30 minutes. In the meantime, I will go ahead and work on the larger mushroom cap. Decided to use a bit of foil for this one. I'm gonna add 3 layers of clay, so I need it to be pretty rigid. Because I want the bottom of the mushroom to be visible, I'm smoothing over a small amount of clay and working it down the sides, blending it directly into the foil. With my sculpting tool, I can create some visual interest here and adding some grooves and some scratches and some scrapes. Just want it to resemble something like a seed pod. I'll let the clay rest for a little while, and now I can start working on the first flounce. This is the same technique that I've already used on the first mushroom. Since this mushroom cap is going to have 2 layers of clay, the first one, I'm not worried about the underside too much. A few scratches and a few dents, but this won't be visible in the end. But before I can add the second layer, this one is going to need to be baked first. With some liquid clay, I will join the cap to the stem, and both will go into the oven and bake for approximately 25-30 minutes. Now that the mushroom has cooled down, I can apply the second layer. I'm using a little bit of cornstarch to thin the clay down as much as possible. And with a touch of cornstarch on the very top, I'm going to go ahead and stretch it out into a vine-like shape. I want the top part to wrap around as much as possible, so I'm going to stretch this clay pretty far. At this point, the clay is pretty sticky, so all I need to do is gently push it into place. And lastly, I will finish off the cap with some chunky spores. I loved how these fairytale mushrooms turned out. I especially loved them in white, and it was my intention to keep them white. But there's been some strangeness going on in my studio lately, and well, when I wake up the next day, things are a little bit different. I think there's a fairy running amok. But for now, I'll take this one to bake.